Hello, children, and welcome to a new chapter, the Gupta Empire. So, in this chapter, we will be talking about the Gupta dynasty, its rulers, and all that they achieved during this era. Now, if you have to learn about the birth of the Gupta dynasty, there was Mauryan Empire that existed, and once this Mauryan Empire declined, there were two political powers which came to existence. That was Satavahanas and Kushan Empire. So if you see in this image here, this was the dynasty expansion of Mauryan Empire. As you can see, they have power over nearly entire India. And once this Mauryan Empire declined, we had the Satavahanas who came to power in the southern region and the Kushan Empire which came to power in the northern region. So what happened was, towards the middle of the 3rd century AD, these two empires declined. And because of this, it gave birth to a new empire, which was the Gupta Empire, that arose from the ruins of the Kushan Empire. So you can see here in this image, it has parts of the Satavahana Empire too, as well as many parts of the Kushan dynasty also came under the Gupta rule. So this was the birth of the Gupta dynasty. Now after the Mauryan Empire, it was the Gupta empires which were the most powerful. So we can say that Gupta Empire was the second most powerful empire. Mauryan Empire was the first most powerful empire in ancient India. The second most powerful empire was the Gupta Empire. Now this empire kept power over most of northern India, and it helped in keeping northern India politically united. It did not allow many invaders to come in during their reign. Now, most of the information that we get about the Gupta dynasties is got from what we call as Prashastis. Now, what are Prashastis exactly? If you see Prashasti, an example is the Allahabad pillar inscription, which is an important source that gives us information. This Allahabad pillar inscription, which is right here, gives praises about the military achievements of a king named SAMUDRAGUPTA. And he was the most powerful warrior king of the Gupta dynasty. So what does Prashasti mean? Prashasti is a special kind of inscription and it means in praise of. So most of the Prashastis that existed tells praises about the king who ruled at that time. If you see the Allahabad pillar inscription, it was composed by Harisena, who was the court poet of Samudragupta's time. So because he was the court poet of Samudragupta's time, this Allahabad pillar has inscription about Samudragupta's achievements. Now this Prashasti gives a long list of rulers that Samudragupta defeated, the names of their territories, and it also praises him that he was a great conqueror, he was an accomplished poet, as well as he was a very talented musician. So with the help of these Prashastis, certain literary artifacts as well as archaeological evidences, we can talk about how the Gupta dynasty was, how the people lived there, and what was the economic status of the people back then. Now when you see these literary sources of the Gupta period, they were written by famous writers like Kalidasa and Bhasa, and also there were accounts of foreign travelers like Faheen who visited these empires at that time. Apart from this literary sources and archaeological sources, we also get information about the Gupta period from the Ajanta paintings and from a large number of gold coins that were produced during the Gupta period. So based on the kind of inscriptions, we can say what kind of status people had back then. And of course, paintings depict a lot about people's state of mind and their environment in which they lived in. So paintings also give a great deal of information about life during the Gupta time. Now, let us talk about certain significant rulers of the Gupta Empire. The first one that we will be talking about is Chandragupta I, who ruled between 320 AD to 335 AD. Now, before we get into Chandragupta 1, we will just take a quick look at this image here. If you see the image here, it talks about 3 very significant rulers of the Gupta period and their conquests. So if you see, Chandragupta 1, whom we'll be talking about now, conquered the dark blue region. After him, we had the successor Samudragupta, who extended his reign to all of these light blue regions. And finally, we had the third most important ruler, who was Chandragupta II, where you can see that he further extended the kingdom. So overall, towards the end of these 3 significant people, the Gupta dynasty had such a big area that they conquered. Now, when we see the Gupta dynasty, we have to first talk about the founder. Who was the founder? It was Sri Gupta, who founded the Gupta dynasty, and he ruled between 240 AD to 280 AD. Now, after that, it was Chandragupta I, who was the person who made the dynasty very powerful, and his capital city was Pataliputra. So Pataliputra, as you can see in this image, is around here. This is Pataliputra, and his kingdom extended from the Magadha to the Prayag, which is today's Allahabad. The region he brought under his control during his reign was Ayodhya. He brought in the mineral-rich Bihar as well as the fertile plains of UP. So you can see this entire region he brought under his control. Now, because he had mineral-rich Bihar and fertile plains of the UP, because of all the material prosperity he had thanks to these 2 regions, this enabled him to establish a very powerful kingdom because natural resources there was very, very rich. He further strengthened his political power by marrying into the Lichavi family. When we see the second most important, it was Samudragupta, who came to power between 335 AD to 380 AD. Samudragupta was son of Chandragupta I, and he's the one who succeeded after Chandragupta, and he helped in extending the Gupta kingdom as we saw in the previous map. Now, his court poet wrote all about his achievements in the Ashoka pillar, which is at Allahabad, which is known as the Prayag Prashasti. So this is the Prayag Prashasti, which also talks about Samudragupta's achievements. So Harisena was a court poet during Samudragupta's time, and he talks particularly about his victory over 5 kinds of kingdoms. First, he talks about how Samudragupta took on the rulers of Ganga-Yamuna Valley, and he took over Aryavarta, which is the region of today's Delhi and western Uttar Pradesh. Then he speaks about how he gained control over the rulers of eastern India, which includes the frontier states of Assam, Nepal, coastal Bengal, and all of these people had to accept his lordship. Now, the interesting thing is that he did not take complete control over them. He let the rulers rule, but he told that those rulers will have to attend his courts and they will have to be his subordinates and they'll have to pay him annual tributes. And then he took over the 12 rulers of the Deccan, which is Dakshinapata, and they surrendered to Samudragupta after being defeated. But again here, he allowed them to rule. Because he was a wise person, he knew that he cannot take complete control over such a vast area of land. So he allowed them to rule, and again they had to pay annual tributes to the Gupta dynasty. Then he went on to defeat the forest kingdom, which was situated in the Vindhya region, and he brought this under the control of the Gupta Empire. Finally, the descendants of the Kushans and the Shakas who were ruling after Afghanistan and a few rulers of Sri Lanka also surrendered to him and offered their daughters for marriage. Now, an interesting thing is, according to the Ashokan pillar, Samudragupta never knew defeat because he was so ambitious in his spirit and he was so brave that he was referred to as Napoleon of India because he never once lost a war. So these were the great achievements of Samudragupta. After Samudragupta, we have the successor who was his son called Ramagupta, but unfortunately Ramagupta was captured by the Shaka kings back then. And because of this, Chandragupta II took over the reign. Chandragupta too went on and defeated the Shakas and took the title of Vikramaditya. So anytime in history, if you hear the word Vikramaditya, it is Chandragupta II of the Gupta dynasty. And he ruled between 380 AD to 413 AD. And during his reign, they say that Guptas attained the highest power and prosperity. So he's considered as one of the most significant Gupta kings. And he inherited a very vast kingdom, and he defeated the Shakas of the western Malwa and Gujarat and took over that region also. He acquired control over 3 prosperous ports of western India, which was Broch, Cambay as well as Sopara. So because of this, trade also increased during Chandragupta II time. He made Ujjain his second capital. So already Patliputra was the first capital. He made Ujjain also a second capital. And he became a great patron of art and literature. During his time, art and literature really flourished and grew. His court was adorned by many great scholars and poets, of which the most significant was Kalidasa. And during his time, the Chinese pilgrim Fahin also visited India, and in Fahin's report, it gives a detailed account of the life of people during the Gupta period. Now, in spite of all these achievements, like any other empire, even the Gupta Empire took a fall. So when we talk about the fall of the Gupta Empire, Chandragupta II was succeeded by his son Kumaragupta, who was in turn succeeded by his son Skandagupta. Now, during the rule of Skandagupta, the Gupta Empire faced the threat of the Huna invasion. Now, when you see Huna invasion, these Huna people were excellent horsemen and archers, and unfortunately, people of the Gupta dynasty did not have enough power to stand against these horsemen and archers. So, Skandagupta and his successors found it very difficult to withstand them. Now, while the Gupta rule lingered on to the middle of the 6th century AD, the glory of the Guptas had long faded a century ago, which was around the 5th century itself. Their glory had faded off, but they continued their rule somehow till the 6th century AD, after which there was a massive decline and the Gupta Empire came to an end. Now, let us talk about some of the key features of the Gupta Empire, about the people's lives, their administration, and things like that. First, let's talk about the system of administration during the Gupta time. When you see the system of administration, the Guptas are all powerful and gained several titles like Parameshwara, Maharaja, the Raja, and things like that, out of which Chandragupta I was the first to adopt the title Maharaja, the Raja. The kings maintained a standing army which was supplemented by forces that were provided by the feudal lords back then. The Gupta also believed in dividing their empire so that it becomes easy for them to rule. So they divided their empire into provinces, districts, and villages. And they were wise to give power to the officials of these provinces and districts so that there was decentralization of the power. This also helped many ideas pour in. If there was just one king who had to take over everything, it would become so difficult to rule over such a vast kingdom. So decentralization actually helped them maintain power for such a long time. On the other hand, if you see the villages, a village headman became the powerful during the Gupta period, and he managed all of the village affairs. Now, for administration, the Guptas involved important local citizens. This also helped them in involving local people in their governance, which kept many people happy. There were a lot of important military officials by the name Senapati, Mahasenapati, and Mahabaladikrita who came into existence during the Gupta period. At the same time, if you see, there were certain officials called as the Samantas acting as an intermediate. So these people acted as intermediates between the kings and the peasants, and their main duty was to collect land revenue. They had to maintain the soldiers and horses, and they also had to provide equipments for warfare when there was a war that was coming up. And these important posts during the Gupta period were said to be hereditary. For example, if you see Harisena, who was a court poet, he also had the post of Mahadandanayaka. Okay, this post was nothing but Chief Judicial Officer, which he inherited from his father. Now, there were a few people, of course, who took up many roles. Sometimes many offices came under one person. That is, they would take up the role as Samanta as well as Mahadandanayaka. So, multiple roles would be held by one single person. So, this was about the administration during the Gupta period. The rest of it, such as social life, their economic life, and religion, all of this we will see in part 2. So let's do a quick recap of part 1. We first spoke about Prashastis, which are nothing but written evidences which talk in praise of the kings that existed back then. Then we spoke about Chandragupta I, who was one of the most powerful rulers of the Gupta dynasty. Then we spoke about his successor Samudragupta. Then we spoke about the third most important ruler of the Gupta dynasty, which was Chandragupta II. And then we spoke about the fall of the empire and what led to the fall of the Gupta dynasty. And lastly, we spoke about the system of administration that existed during the Gupta period. Please look up at the second video to know more about the Gupta period. Thank you.